Welcome to a new video from the Building CI/CD Pipelines with Jenkins course brought to you by Coralogix. My name is Valentin Despa, and in this series you will learn how to build, test and deploy a Java application to AWS using Jenkins pipelines. In case you have missed any of the previous videos, make sure that you check the video description for the full playlist. In this video, you will learn how to create a Jenkins pipeline that compiles a Java project using Maven as a build tool. We're going to start working on the CI pipeline by first creating the build stage. With this step, we want to compile the project. This step is done by the compiler that will transform the Java code into bytecode. This step will let us know if the application contains any syntax errors, missing dependencies, or anything else that would prevent the application from running. Now that we know how to run the project locally, it is time to automate the process and let Jenkins do the work of compiling, testing, and packaging the application. So we are gonna start by creating a new pipeline project. If you're not familiar with the concept, please take a look at the introduction to CI/CD pipelines with Jenkins. I'll find a link in the video description. So in Jenkins, I'm going to create a new job. It's going to be a pipeline project, and I'm going to call this calculator API. Now let's jump to the pipeline part. And just to get started, I'm going to select the hello world example. This will populate the code that we need to write. And instead of the stage hello, we're going to have here the stage build. So the main command that we want to run is the following. So we're going to use the shell if we are on a Linux, Unix-like system. So that's going to be using the Maven wrapper. Going to simply use clean compile. Now, if you're running this on Windows, you want to use bat. And again, the command will look something like this. Using the Maven wrapper, clean compile. I'm gonna write a comment just in front of it because I'm not using Windows for this example. I'm on a macOS system, but the principle is absolutely the same. Now, Jenkins doesn't have any idea where are we trying to run this command, and the Maven wrapper is only available inside our Java project. So for that reason, the first thing that we need to do is to clone that repository that we have forked originally. So inside the steps, we'll have another step. This step will be called git. And with git, what you're trying to do is to get the repository. So we need here the path to that repository. The path to the repository can be obtained by opening a browser and going to the repository that you have forked. Click here on code, and again, I'm going to use the same URL that we have used inside IntelliJ. So now let's save and run this pipeline. I'm going to click here from the left panel on Build Now. So as you can see, the execution was successful. I can click here on the build number. And if I'm looking at the console output, I'll be able to see what has happened. And I can see here that the build is successful. So whatever we did here worked without any issues. It may happen that Jenkins will not detect your Java installation locally. And in the video description, we will find some ideas on how to troubleshoot that problem or any other problems that you may encounter in this process. Going back to our project, you'll notice that writing the pipeline in this editor is not the best experience. So what we're going to do is simply copy the contents that we have inside the file here and go back to IntelliJ. In IntelliJ, at the root of the project, we're going to create a new file. I'm going to call that file Jenkins file. We're not going to use any extension, and it really doesn't matter how you name this file, but this is sort of like a convention to call it Jenkins file. I'm going to add it to Git when we're asked because we want later to commit this file. I'm going to paste here the contents that we have originally written inside Jenkins. So the next step would be to commit this Jenkins file. And I'll write here initial Jenkins pipeline. And I don't only want to commit it, but I also want to push it. So I'm going to select here push. And of course, this is a public repository, so we could access the code and have it inside our project. But now that we are trying to make changes, this will not work. So what we need to do is to log in via GitHub. And I will be redirecting to GitHub, and this is a simple way to get this authorization set up. Of course, if you have already GitHub working on your machine, this push will automatically work. But if it's your first time working with GitHub, this is a quite easy way to get started. So practically here we'll be authorizing IntelliJ to work with your repositories and your code. And then we can see here that 2 commits have been pushed. I made the change just before this. This is why there were 2 commits. In your case, it will only be 1 of them. And if we go back to the repository and inspect what has changed, we'll be able to see that we now have this additional file, Jenkins file here. Now, what we want to do next is to use this repository and to have Jenkins read the Jenkins file directly from it. So in order to configure that, we're not going to say that we want to define the pipeline script here. We just want to say, get this configuration from somewhere else. So I'm going to say here pipeline script from SCM. So our source code management is in this case Git. I'm going to use here the repository URL. No authorization is needed because this is a public repository and Jenkins can read without providing any credentials. As you can notice, the script path is defaulted to Jenkins file. This is the exact same name as the file we have created. So this is what Jenkins expects, but if you have a different file name, you can rename that as well. I'm going to click here on save, and let's run this pipeline again and see how it works. And you can notice here a new stage has been automatically created. So in the first stage, what Jenkins will do is to read this Jenkins file to understand what needs to be done, how the pipeline will look like, and it will clone the repository that we have, look for that Jenkins file inside there, and when that file is available, then the rest of the pipeline will be created. Our pipeline currently is short, but what this allows us to do is to not go back to Jenkins for doing this. We can modify the pipeline directly from our code, and then because it's inside the code, we can track all the changes that we do to the pipeline. So in case later on something is not working properly, it's quite easy to understand what has been going on and who has made the last change and why the pipeline doesn't work anymore.